Hi, I'm Yusuf Salam. Welcome to the Peace, Love, and Shawarma podcast, where my friends and I discuss possibilities and strategies for a better world where love, peace, and justice reign supreme. Today's guest is Rich Siegel. Rich has been an in-demand freelance musician on the New York scene for many years as a pianist, singer, and musical director, and also has an extensive international performance resume. Raised in what he calls the cult of atheistic Zionism posing as Judaism, in his youth, Rich was very involved as a supporter of Israel, notably as a teenage Zionist youth group president. He then lived in Israel in his 20s, working as a pianist in a luxury hotel. Rich's change of heart began as a spiritual awakening by which he came to see that Jewish tribal identity and the state of Israel were worshipped as idols. Then he became acquainted with Zionism's crimes against humanity, which contradicted the Zionist narrative he grew up with. Organizing demonstrations against Zionist activity in the northern New Jersey suburbs where he lives, Rich's activism hit a high note when a talk he gave in front of the Teaneck Town Council went viral. Recently, Rich was fired from a teaching job at a local music school due to a pro-Palestine Facebook post. He is currently running for Congress in New Jersey with the Ceasefire and Justice Party. I'm so excited to hear Rich speak about his journey and his awareness. Welcome, Rich. It's so good to have you with us today.
Well, thanks. It's great to be on with you.
Yeah, we've been Facebook friends for quite some time, for years, and I really appreciate you, my dear brother, and all that you are doing for the Palestinian cause and just your love for humanity across the board. So I commend you on that, and I'm so thankful to have you today.
Well, that's such a nice compliment. Thanks so much.
Yes, sir. Now, first, we both come from different Zionist traditions. Would you mind sharing your background along with perhaps the aha moment or events that caused you to rethink your beliefs?
Well, it may be a longer explanation than you anticipate because it really happened for me in two steps. Mm-hmm. I was raised in a Reform synagogue in Pearl River, New York. It's called Beth Am Temple. My parents were founding members. And basically, I consider it an institution of atheism and Zionism posing as Judaism. Mm-hmm. So it was really not about Jewish religion in terms of worshiping God. It was about Jewish identity in the state of Israel, and I call those two things the twin idols of what Judaism has become recently, or what much of Judaism has become. So the first step for me, basically coming from a place where Jewish Zionist atheists met to worship Jewish identity in the state of Israel rather than worshiping God. I came into a God awareness first, and started looking around for a place that was about God in Judaism, and never really found it. I mean, I didn't want to become an Orthodox Jew. I wasn't really interested in all 613 laws that need to be followed. But I had a real problem with Judaism because it had become so saturated with atheism. And that was my first problem. But even after having that concern, I was still very convinced of my Zionist programming. And in that context, there was very deep Zionist programming. basically the system of lies about how we Jews needed a place and it was natural to go to our homeland, the origin of our religion, for that place. And we never intended to do anything to harm the Arabs. We just wanted to be their good neighbors. And they just wanted to drive us into the sea just because they hate us, just like everybody hates Jews. So that was the child abuse that I was raised with.
Wow.
And, I just chuckled, but I really think it is child abuse to raise children to believe that the whole world has an irrational hatred for you. First of all, it's not true. And, it's not a way to raise healthy people. Yeah. So, it took me about another 20 years before I figured out the depth of the lies that I had been taught in my Zionist indoctrination. So I was, past 40 by that time.
Wow.
And if there was an aha moment, I would say at a point, I think I just became interested in the Palestinian point of view because I had lived with this conflict my whole life. And I was sick of it. It was just, bad news after bad news after bad news, And at a point, I think I just decided that, if these Palestinians are just so determined to give us such a hard time, maybe they have something to say and maybe I need to hear it.
Wow.
And, I became open and I didn't really know where I'd find that information. I actually had a gig in Massachusetts and my wife was coming up to visit me.
You say a gig because you're a musician, so everybody
I'm a
understands.
freelance musician. Yeah, yes. I am a musician. I was. I had a gig playing piano at this upscale club on Nantucket.
Sweet.
And I did that for 2 summers. Anyway, so I was meeting my wife. She was coming to visit me. She was pregnant with our daughter at the time, actually. And I met her at the train station in Providence, Rhode Island. And the train station is right across the street from the state capitol there. And there were activists who had a table out. Wow. And I said, good, all right, this is an opportunity for me to do some reading. So, I gave him a little donation and I picked up some stuff to read. And of course, I expected that it would be ridiculous and it would just confirm my Zionism. And that's not what I found at all. I found it to be very credible. And I found myself to be really shocked by what I was finding out. And that became a process for me. It really began about 7 or 8 years where I just read continuously on the subject. I found the Jewish revisionist historians and, because we Jews need to hear it from other Jews first. And, then I started reading other writers, Palestinian writers and, historians who are neither Jewish nor Arab. I felt really angry. I felt like I'd been lied to my whole life. I felt like I had been part of something that I would not have been part of if I had real information. I should probably share with you that as a teenager, I was president of a Zionist youth group. And in my early 20s, I lived and worked in Israel. So, and I was I was on track to become Israeli, really. Only by the grace of God, I got a job offer that was really attractive. And I left Israel for that reason.
Wow.
I got a job offer back here in the States, actually, in Miami. And So I left Israel at that time. So, having been very active in supporting Israel, um, based on the lies that I had been told, since early childhood,
Mm-hmm.
um, I felt like, I like to describe it as I felt like the driver of a getaway car and nobody told me they were robbing a bank.
Mm-hmm.
So
Now I'm gonna ask you a question real quick here. Now,
I think you should.
well, with my Christian Zionist background, I mean, I am fully persuaded that the people who told me lies actually believed them. I don't think they were trying to deceive me. How do you feel about that? Do you feel,
Well,
how do you feel?
I feel exactly the same way.
Yeah.
And I think it's multiple generations that believe this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I have a certain curiosity about how much they knew and how much they didn't know because, um, you know, Jewish objection to Zionism in Israel was pretty common up until the Six-Day War in 1967. I mean, that was the pivotal point when really the entire Jewish world, with
Mm-hmm.
few exceptions, embraced Zionism in Israel and started to treat the few holdouts as traitors.
Mm-hmm.
But prior to 1967, there were lots and lots of Jews in America who were non-Zionist and anti-Zionist, and all the Zionist Jews were aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to think that my parents and my grandparents, although they were certainly committed Zionists, had to be aware that there were other points of view. When I was raised, there was no other point of view. I mean, I could not even imagine an anti-Zionist Jew. We knew about the Haredi anti-Zionist Jews, the black hats,
Mm-hmm.
the black coat guys. Neturei Karta is their actual name,
Mm-hmm.
and the Satmar sect. So we knew that there were ultra Orthodox Jews who objected to Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And we just laughed at them. We just, felt like they were ungrateful idiots. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really how we spoke about them.
Yeah.
So, they were really the only ones I was aware of, and they were just summarily dismissed.
Mm-hmm.
But absolutely, the people who taught me my Zionism believed it. And I should add to that even though Zionist indoctrination was everywhere around me, I mean, I was raised in this synagogue and in its Hebrew school. I went to a religious instruction, one afternoon a week growing up.
Mm-hmm.
But my primary Zionist indoctrinator was my
Mm-hmm.
mother. My mother, I mean, she was just so gung ho pro Israel, and she made it a point to teach me everything that she thought she knew. And to her credit, and this woman is about to turn 90 years old,
Wow.
she has become anti-Zionist today. She's made the journey with me,
Mm.
you know. So, which is very gratifying because most people of her generation don't. Actually, most people of my generation don't either.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Now, can your and I don't want I want to be delicate about this, but like you, your family, friends, people you grew up with, are was everybody convinced that they could actually trace their genealogy, back to the Levant, back to ancient Palestine?
um, I think so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really kind of silly because white Ashkenazi Jews are obviously Europeans, and we're descended from European converts to Judaism. I mean, maybe there's some ancient Israelite blood in there somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, part of the misinformation is that we are the native population of the Holy Land. And it's clearly not true.
Yeah, that's like becoming Roman Catholic doesn't make anybody Italian, but yes. But we love all people, and we embrace all people, you know?
Yes, no, that's a very good comparison. Sure.
Yeah. Wow.
But that's, you know, that's what Zionism is really based on. I mean, you know, the Jewish religion, first of all, let's be clear that Judaism forbids Zionism, okay? And yet, paradoxically, Zionism is rooted in Judaism. I mean, there is this concept of exile and return. The Jewish religion teaches that we are in exile, that we went into exile after the destruction of the Second Temple, which, by the way, is not true. There may have been some elites that were exiled, but the vast majority of the population remained in the Holy Land, and those people, the descendants of those people, are the Palestinian Muslims and Christians today. Okay, so we never really went into exile, but there is this concept of exile in the Jewish religion. So Judaism spread pretty rapidly at that time. I mean, at that time, Judaism actually sought converts, and it doesn't anymore. Okay, so as Judaism was spreading, people were converting into a religion that had a concept of exile and return. So, you know, all of my Jewish ancestors, who, by the way, my family is all rooted in Eastern Europe and in a few different countries. But all of my ancestors, converted into a religion that taught them that they were in exile and that they were going to return. Now, it's innocuous enough because Judaism dictates that we get to return when the Messiah comes. And the Messiah is always some far off idea. Okay. Christianity believes that Jesus is the Messiah, and Judaism does not. You know, I'm not going to take sides in that fight right now, but so Judaism has this concept of the Messiah, and when the Messiah comes, we get to return. Well, what's the return? You know, we're not really from that place, but okay. As long as it's something that's not actually put into practice. But what's happened with Zionism is that, you know, we are making this return to this place that we don't even come from. And we're doing it by force, and we're doing it with ethnic cleansing. And that's the insanity of it. Now, the original Zionists were atheists, okay? You know, the movement was started by Theodor Herzl, his book, Der Judenstaat, which means the Jewish state, okay? And he was an atheist. And the early Zionists were atheists, and Orthodox Judaism rejected Zionism universally at first, okay? But then once religious Jews took on Zionism, they made it religious, okay? There was a Rabbi Koch in the 1920s who basically decided, well, the Messiah isn't here yet, but we're entering into the Messianic era, which was, you know, the way that these new Orthodox Zionists were fooling God, okay? We've entered the Messianic era, so now we can return. So then it became a religious duty to return to this place that we don't even come from. Our religion comes from there, but we don't. You know, that's where a lot of the insanity is rooted.
Like, wow, that is it's really amazing to hear you talk about this and your journey and how you have kind of walked through this. And you know, while I'm hearing you, I'm also, Rich, I always want to empathize with people, even if I don't agree with them. I like to see where they're coming from and
Okay.
how fears drive them. And, like, people, and I know people who came out of the Great Depression, and you could give them $1 billion and they'd still hide money under a mattress, and they
Sure.
would still scrape. And because that mindset is there,
Absolutely.
and if you have been persecuted like the Jews were in the 1930s, 1940s, and, all of these horrible things, with the Nazis, and I mean, just absolutely despicable. And people had, done to you what actually the Israelis have done to the Palestinians is so sad. But having had that done to them, people, they want a place of safety. They want peace. And if you've ever lived through that, or you've heard horror stories your whole life, you're so scared. I can imagine just being so scared of the next Hitler, and just people doing irrational things, almost like, just I'm not calling people animals, but when you trap an animal in a corner, it just, is just going to defend itself. And if it has that mindset, and we humans can do that if we're driven by fear, we can do really irrational things, and we can actually become what we hate. And so, I always, when as much as I hate what has happened to the Palestinians, I always, I'm always looking for humanity and trying to empathize with people, and, see what drove them to do what they did. Of course, without condoning, what happened. But could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I'm going to basically disagree with you
Oh,
because number one,
okay. Okay.
I mean, it's very nice of you to be so considerate and try to understand Zionist insanity and try to. I mean, I know you're
No,
not
it's
excusing it.
people. It's not the ideology. I hate the ideology, but I
I
love people. I
understand.
love people, and you just,
Okay.
you try and put yourself or your ancestors in their shoes. You can kind of see, out of human nature sometimes, why people do what they do. That's what I'm saying. I'm taking
Oh,
it
I got that,
from that
but
standpoint. Yes.
but I think if we break it down, it's there's more to it than that, because first of
Uh-huh.
all, Zionism began long before the Holocaust. I
Yes.
mean,
Yes.
Theodore Herzl he wrote that book in 1895. The first Zionist Congress was in
Yes.
1897, and between the first large scale Zionist settlement was in 1906, and
Yeah.
then Israel became a country in 1948. So in the years in between,
Mm-hmm.
Zionism was pretty much a marginal sort of movement. Wasn't
Yes.
taken very seriously by most Jews,
But
although
I'm
some
not
took it
sure.
very
I'm not sure
seriously.
that the people who, finally, got out of Auschwitz, understood all of that. They just knew what happened to them, and
Right. Okay. Well,
they were scared.
yes, but let me get to that,
Yeah.
because first of all, one thing you need to know is that during the entire history of the pre-state Jewish settlement community, which was called the Yishuv,
Mm-hmm.
um, there was a transfer committee in place. They were
Mm-hmm.
studying the native population with designs to get rid of the native population. So this was always a plan. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, all right, fast forward to we have um, the crimes against humanity perpetrated against the Jewish people by the Nazis in Europe. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, my family were victimized. I have photos of three of my mother's cousins who were murdered by the Nazis, and we
Mm-hmm.
know of a fourth one, pretty sure about. And that's just my mother's side of the family. My father also came from areas that were occupied by the Nazis, but we know nothing about what happened to his family. So, so you have these Jewish refugees in various camps, and where are they going to go?
Mm-hmm.
It may surprise you that most of them did not want to go to Palestine. Okay, they
Mm-hmm.
wanted to go to other places, and there were many places that were open to receiving them. Now, this is
Uganda was one place where they were going to send all the Jews, of all
well,
places.
no, that's a different.
Yeah.
So basically, your reference to Uganda is about a place that was considered for the Jewish homeland before they settled on Palestine. So you got to rewind way back. That's when Uganda was considered. Argentina was also considered. But if you're going to call a movement Zionism, you have to go to the land of Zion, which is Palestine. Okay.
Yeah.
So by the time World War II happened and we're dealing with Jewish refugees after the war, Palestine had long ago been decided, and Palestine had significant Jewish settlement already. Okay.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is that there were many options for the Jews in the refugee camps, and this is something that was completely denied in my Zionist upbringing.
Oh, wow.
In my Zionist brainwashing, the whole idea was that the world. This is how they put it: the world is divided between places where Jews can't be and places where Jews can't go. So the only place we have is Israel, and it's nonsense.
So there's a deep, again, these people were deeply hurt, fearful, and brainwashed on top of it.
Well, I see.
Yeah. And I'm not defending. Don't anybody send me an email and say I'm anti-Zionist, 100%. I am pro-Palestinian.
No, I totally get that. But I think the whole thing was way more intentional and way more devious than you are giving it credit for.
Yeah, because you're saying even people who escaped, who survived Auschwitz, they had evil intentions?
No,
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm getting at.
Absolutely not. But the ones who had the intentions were the Zionist agents.
Yeah, who had been pulling the strings from long before Hitler and all of that.
So they are arriving at these displaced persons camps, and they are directing Jews to go to Palestine. They don't want Jews to go to other places. Okay. They're taking people who have just been through hell and who are bewildered and who are, who have lost family members, and they are writing their documents for them and sending them to Palestine. When in actuality, look, there were places closed to them, absolutely, but there were many places open to them.
Yeah.
And to give one example, the Dominican Republic was saying, please, Jews, come here. Okay. Wow. So there were options. And this was all, shocking for me to learn because I was told that there were no options. And one example that was given is the SS St. Louis, which was a ship that was sent out with Jewish refugees. And the ship was first turned down by Cuba and then was turned down by the United States. And so it went back to Europe. And of course, the story that I got was that, nobody would accept this ship. So it had to go back to Germany, and then all the Jews were killed in the concentration camps. It's not true. Okay. This was during the war. Western European nations had not been occupied yet. And the Jews from this ship were accepted by France, Belgium, Holland, and the UK. Well, 3 of those countries were then occupied, and many of those Jews actually did perish. But it wasn't a case of there was no place for the Jews to go. The places that did accept them, 3 of the 4 turned out not to be safe. But you can't make the case that nobody would accept Jews. That wasn't true during the war, and it wasn't true after the war. And after the war, there was no place that was dangerous anymore. Okay. But these Jews were directed to Palestine because Zionist agents wanted them there. And many of these refugees, the young men who came out of these camps, they arrived in Palestine and were given a rifle and went right into into fighting the Nakba, what Israelis called the War of Independence, but they were used in the endeavor of ethnically cleansing Palestine, right from the refugee camps in Europe.
Wow, it's just, I'll tell you, it's just wild. Thank you for sharing, some of that history, and I know, just sharing your family's history. There's certain information and just nuggets that you can get from certain people that you're not going to
Okay.
get anywhere else because of individual experiences. And thank you for just being vulnerable and sharing your life and your, yeah, this is amazing. I really appreciate this.
Okay.
I ask you this, what advice do you have for people who want to be better informed about all things Palestine slash quote unquote Israel?
Um, well, read,
Mhm.
um, meet people,
Mhm.
reach out. There are usually, depending on where you are, where you live, you're
Mhm.
probably not too far from Palestinians, because there's a big Palestinian diaspora. They live everywhere.
Yes.
um, in terms of reading, I think, if I could recommend a couple of books, specifically, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine by Ilan Pappé
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
a very good place to start.
Yes,
Uh,
he's an Israeli historian too, a Jewish Israeli
yes, a Jewish
historian.
Israeli
So
historian.
yeah,
And another Jewish Israeli who wrote a terrific book on the subject is a friend of mine, Miko Peled,
yes,
and he wrote a
yes.
book called The General's Son, and
Hmm.
he he speaks about his own personal and family experience because he is the son of an Israeli general who uh, was involved in the 1967-68 war.
Hmm.
And incidentally, I took a tour of Palestine, which was led by Miko Peled.
Wow.
But so those are two excellent books if you want,
Yeah.
want to get started.
I've met both of
Um,
those gentlemen at the American Muslims for Palestine convention that they have every year in Chicago on
oh, okay,
Thanksgiving weekend. So if anybody's
right.
listening and you want to meet you want to meet people like this as well as so many precious Palestinian Muslims, also Palestinian Christians or otherwise, or just allies. It's really a great place to be and really just to have that fellowship, to break bread together, love on each other. And I mean, these people are so precious. There's nobody more precious on this earth than Palestinians. I'll tell you that. Yeah.
Well, they've been through a lot, and
Hmm.
it has certainly been a character building history.
Hmm.
Yeah, they tend to be very special people. I feel that way too.
Yes, yes. Well, man, that's wonderful. Look, I deeply appreciate, I mean, your advocacy for the Palestinian cause. And could you please share about your Palestinian activism journey?
Well, it all just started by my re-educating myself on the subject, and a lot of times I'm accused of being courageous with my activism, and when frankly I'm just really pissed off.
Hmm.
I started going to demonstrations after I realized that I've been lied to all my life, and I
Hmm.
began supporting the people that I was taught all my life were my enemies, and they're not.
Yes, yes.
Um, and after I started going to demonstrations, I started organizing them. The first one that I organized was right here in Teaneck, New Jersey, and they there are Israeli real estate companies who tour Jewish communities
Hmm.
in the United States, Canada, and the UK, probably in other areas, but I know specifically that they occur in those three countries. And they have them frequently here in Teaneck, New Jersey. And I became aware of an Israeli real estate event, which was being held in a local synagogue.
Hmm.
And some of the real estate that they were selling was consisted of uh, illegal West Bank settlement real estate. So they were violating international law. But really, all of the real estate they were selling was for Jews only. So, in that sense, it's redlined real estate.
Hmm.
And we don't permit discrimination in real estate sales in this country, not since the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was another act, a 1968 Fair Housing Act.
Mm-hmm.
So, basically I became aware of this real estate event that was violating international law and domestic anti-discrimination law.
Mm-hmm.
And I organized a demonstration against it. I contacted the rabbi first, and I asked him to shut it down. And of course, I knew he would refuse.
Mm-hmm.
And that led to a very interesting conversation, very revealing, and think your listeners might be interested to know that the rabbi told me that he intentionally was having this real estate event in the sanctuary of the synagogue. Now, this is a big synagogue, and I haven't been in it myself. They kicked me out in a minute. Wow. But I'm aware that they have a catering hall that they could use, or a hall that could be used for that purpose. But the rabbi told me that they have the real estate event in the sanctuary of the synagogue because they consider the redemption of the land to be a religious duty. Mm. Let me repeat that, okay?
Yeah.
The redemption of the land is a religious duty. What does redemption of the land mean? And that's the phrase they use.
Yikes.
What it means is putting Jews on the land and getting the Muslims and Christians off the land. Mm-hmm. That's the redemption of the land. That is blatant racism cloaked in religious language.
Mm-hmm. And the crazy thing is somebody like Ivanka Trump, who married Jared Kushner, has rights to land over there in Palestine, and someone whose grandmother still has the key to her house but can't get into Palestine right now, doesn't belong there. It's ludicrous.
You know what? It's even worse than that. I mean, yeah. I was in Palestine in 2017, and I know things have changed considerably since then. Mm-hmm. But we stayed in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood in East Jerusalem, mm-hmm. and we toured that area. And I saw places where, well, if you're interested in my experiences there, there was one home that my friend Robert Martin was on this tour with me. He's an Australian activist who's made some really nice videos, and so you may be familiar with his work. So he was giving me the tour. He knew the neighborhood well, and he showed me a house where the Palestinian family had been kicked out by Jewish settlers, and in protest, they lived in a tent across the street from the house for like months. Mm. But they weren't there anymore. And as he's showing me this house, a car drives by and stops, and it was the lady of the house with her teenage daughter, and they saw us looking at the house, so they wanted us to know that's our house. That's our house. We were kicked out, and you feel like, what planet am I on where I'm witnessing this? Okay, here's another example.
Where else could you justify that happening if
you can't justify
you don't believe
anywhere.
that your God backs up such heinous acts against humanity?
Absolutely,
yeah.
There was another house that was pointed out to me, and I did not meet the individuals involved in this, but it was a Palestinian family put an addition on their house, and it was not done vertically. It was, they didn't add a story. They moved forward, so they had like a front lawn area, and they built a new front of the house and eliminated most of that front lawn. Okay, mm-hmm. So they have an addition on the house, and an Orthodox Jewish family, a settler family, moved into the new addition they put on their house. And so this Palestinian family is living in the house they used to have. They built this addition, and these people are in the addition that they just built, and they can't get rid of them. I mean, how bizarre is that? And how bizarre is it to even want to do that? To impose yourself in such a way that you know you're going to be hated, you know you're going to be resented, but somehow the entitlement is so deeply rooted that they just do these absurd things. And they're willing to live with the hatred because they've in their minds, they've dehumanized their victims to such an extent that they just see them as irrational Jew haters, even though they're giving them every reason to hate.
So here's something that I've learned firsthand. Palestinians are some of the most hospitable people, if not the most hospitable people on earth. And if we backtrack a little bit, we look at the Nakba in 1948, getting back to our conversation. You know, while I did say, and I do, I mean, I have compassion on anybody who went through the Holocaust, but when people welcome you with open arms and treat you, you come there with, I won't even say the shirt on your back, because some didn't have a shirt or shoes, just came. I've seen pictures of Jews coming off of ships and coming there and being welcomed with open arms, and also the Palestinians before that dwelling together, Muslims, Jews, Christians, without an issue before 1948. It wasn't all of this horror. But
okay, but I gotta correct you because because there was plenty of conflict before 1948, but there was not plenty of conflict before the Zionist movement. Okay, so there was the Hebron riot. There were skirmishes, riots in the 20s and 30s because there was Zionist settlement, and the settlement practices were abusive. There was land acquisition.
What I was getting at was this was not incited by the Palestinians, by the Arabs.
Absolutely not.
That's what I'm getting at. There was they had no beef until the Jews started. I understand that there was a precursor to 1948.
The abuses started earlier than 1948. So by the time 1948 happened, I mean, the Palestinians were, first of all, in 1947, you had the UN partition resolution. So, there was the Zionist abuses were, already in full swing prior to 1948. And then subsequent to the UN partition plan, that's when the Nakba, went into full swing. And that's when you had out and out ethnic cleansing. But to your point, the Palestinians absolutely are extremely hospitable people and would have easily tolerated and welcomed Jewish settlement as long as it wasn't abusive to them. And, incidentally, there were Zionists who were looking for that. I mean, there was the Brit Shalom movement of the 1920s, which included people like Albert Einstein and I'm not thinking of names right now, but what the Brit Shalom movement wanted was Jewish settlement and Jewish institutions, without Jewish nationalism and certainly without any ethnic cleansing. I mean, there were abuses of the Palestinians already at the time of the Brit Shalom movement, and they wanted to put a stop to that. They wanted Zionism to take on a more peaceable and brotherly character. And of course, they did not prevail. And Zionism continued to be the abusive agenda that it had been.
But there were decades prior, before all this stuff was stirred up. What I'm saying is, people say, "Oh, these people have just been fighting for thousands and thousands of years," and it's really a false history. But it
Well,
makes,
yes, but
and Edward Said's, Orientalism gets into it because in the American psyche, it's like, well, these Arabs are all crazy people. They hated the Jews, and no, they were hospitable, and there have been, there have been lengthy times
well,
where people of all three Abrahamic faiths, if you will, got along together and can still get along
absolutely.
together.
No,
Yes.
absolutely. That you're absolutely correct about that. And but I want to point out that this is part of the Zionist propaganda. This is what Zionists want you to believe.
Mm-hmm.
If they get people to believe that it's an ancient conflict,
Yeah.
then then it follows that, well, it's the situation is hopeless and it's intractable, and these people have hated each other forever and ever.
Mm-hmm.
Not true, not true at all.
No, and I heard that in the church too. I heard that from the Christian Zionists. It's like,
right.
well, it's hopeless and it's in God's hands, and the Jews are God's people and they belong there. And if
Yeah, all right. Well, listen,
if you speak against the Israelis, God's going to curse you, and this, that, and the other, just nutty stuff.
Well, you just opened up a whole nother can of worms. And I think that, as long as you have, I need to address that, because basically Christian Zionism is not Christianity at all.
No, it isn't.
Christian Zionism is the result of Zionist Jewish infiltration into Christianity, beginning with the Scofield Reference Bible, which is about, when was that? I don't want to give a false date, but it's over 100 years old for sure.
Yeah. C.I. Scofield, John Nelson Darby, who was really into Zionism. Scofield was talk about a scoundrel, a crooked lawyer that the Zionists got hold of, and then you got Oxford, and there's a whole lot of stuff there with the Brits, and that's just completely corrupt.
So basically, what they did was they took the Bible. Mm-hmm. And they put Zionist commentary in the margins to introduce the Zionist agenda into Christianity. Yeah. And that's what, led to, CUFI, Christians United
for Israel, John Hagee.
And that charlatan, John Hagee.
Yeah.
And, Christians of that ilk, who I don't think are Christians at all. I mean, no. They're certainly not in line with the Sermon on the Mount, which I think is
definitely
the most intrinsic part of Christianity.
Yeah, definitely not.
But basically, and I've had conversations with many Christians who are just so confused, because it's like, well, they're hearing one thing in church, and then they're getting news about a slaughter, and they don't know how to reconcile it,
I'll let people connect the dots, but John Hagee is also a very wealthy man.
Oh, absolutely.
You can Google that.
Oh, truly.
Yeah.
But it's there. Actually, I want to drop a resource about Christian Zionism, which I think your listeners might find useful. There is an organization called We Hold These Truths. Mm-hmm. And these are very dedicated Christian people who are very, very determined to educate Christians away from Christian Zionism.
Yes,
and they're good people. I'm in touch with them. I participated in a vigil that they did. Actually, I helped organize it here in New Jersey. It was a bunch of years ago. So it's We Hold These Truths, and the website is whtt.org.
Mm-hmm. I also recommend Bethlehem Bible College in Bethlehem, Palestine.
Okay.
There's the Sabil, Friends of Sabil, North America.
Absolutely. Yes.
I just Jonathan Katub, precious brother. Yeah.
I just went to an event that they had here in Jersey, and I met Jonathan Katub.
Yeah.
I heard him speak. Oh, he was a wonderful speaker.
Sweet guy too. I mean, he's a brain, but he's so sweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's That's, it's something that, that things just come full circle, and we both come from different Zionist traditions, and our eyes have been open. And I'm really encouraged that a lot of people's eyes are being opened. And I think the younger generation just isn't buying all the savagery and the ethnic cleansing and the genocide and the
Yeah.
war. I know
Well,
they're not, because I
well,
talk
yeah.
with them and I see the statistics with with military recruitment and everything else. They're not buying into it.
No, no, they're not, and that's why
No.
we know that Zionism and Israel will end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the question is like how many people have to die in the meantime,
Yeah.
because it's just so tragic. But
Yeah.
when I look at my daughter's generation, they're smart, they're savvy, and you know what? I mean, when we were growing up, we had the corporate media.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't much else, and
Yeah.
I had that, and I had my indoctrination, and then I got my on I got my hands on a few books and alternative reading that I was able to do.
Yeah.
And now they've got TikTok, man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
our government is, wants to shut down access to TikTok because the whole younger generation is learning real
Yes.
stuff about the Palestinians. You know,
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
they have access to information that isn't polluted
Yeah.
by the corporate media agenda.
Yeah, and plus they can
So
make these beautiful Palestinian friends, these wonderful
yeah,
people that
absolutely,
they can actually, get in touch with and correspond. And they're like, well, these people are not the savages that that we've heard about. This
absolutely.
is not what we've been taught. This does not fit the stereotype.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is awesome. And I know I'm so happy because both of my sons are, yes, they are pro-Palestinian. They understand the whole Zionist thing. Well,
Right.
to a degree. We're all learning, I mean, history is something that you continue to learn. I picked up some tidbits from what you said today. And it's just amazing. No matter how much you read, you're always learning. And the more people you talk to, you glean from their experiences, and that's important. That really is, yeah. So, for anyone who's listening, what are some ways that folks can get involved in this righteous cause that can make an impact, Rich?
Well, right now, I would say go to your local university that has an encampment and
Mm,
go hang out with those kids and support them.
mm,
Um, you know, donate. There's all kinds of great charities that help the Palestinian people.
mhm,
Um, and depending on where you are, look for pro-Palestine organizations. Look for organizations that are having demonstrations and participate in the demonstrations.
mhm,
One thing that I do that I think most people won't want to do, but I'm pretty determined. So I have a
mhm.
Palestinian flag hanging off my house,
Uh-huh.
and I have a lawn sign that says, what does it say? It's relevant to the genocide in Gaza. Oh,
Mhm.
it says ceasefire now, stop funding the genocide. That's
Yeah.
what my lawn sign says.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can show people how you feel about it. And,
Yes.
but it can invite controversy. It can invite trouble
Mhm.
too.
Yeah.
I had a guy making some nasty comments in front of my house just the other day, and
Mhm.
I gave him some nasty comments right back.
Mhm. Mhm.
So they love to call me well, first they call me an anti-Semite, and then when they discover that I'm Jewish, they call me a self-hating Jew.
Uh-huh.
And I say, look, if you're going to call me a self-hating Jew, call me a proud self-hating Jew, okay? So
Yeah, I found even wearing my kufiya in public, or a pro-Palestine T-shirt, it's like a magnet for wonderful people. Sometimes you'll get looks, but it really is, and it's just there's so many ways to bring attention to the cause
yeah,
on social media, TikTok, even with the little bit sometimes. You just share it, and you share it with love, and I do think that makes
yeah.
a big difference. Well, I got you. Let me ask you something really controversial. That I'm going to say, and you can feel free. I've said
Okay.
this a million times,
So
but
so
you
we
can
we we
disagree
have
with
it.
me.
we haven't talked about anything controversial today, have we?
No, not at all. But I want to get really controversial here. Okay, let me ask.
I mean, you know, what do we talk about that's controversial? I mean, you know, look, my Jewish people, we were victims in the Holocaust, and now we are perpetrators of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, and that's a shame. That is a crying shame. Yeah. And you know, I feel responsible as a Jewish person who sees the reality to get involved. You know, so there's your controversy. Yes. So what could be more controversial? Please understand
this too. Anything that I said that may have, if somebody misunderstood, come across as, you know, as pro-Zionist, I'm not, but I am pro-Jew. I am pro-human, and I also, I mean, you have this anger because you were duped, and there is a righteous indignation that people like me also have, because Christians were so responsible for the Holocaust. So I have to, you know, for the Holocaust, and then, you know, on top of this, the Nakba. So I you know, my religion and my tradition has its hands in both of these atrocities. So that's why I again speak to you as someone who came from that tradition, and your family, you know, coming out of, and people being killed in the Holocaust. I love people, and that's why I want to empathize and understand people's perspectives. Although again, I am completely anti-Zionist while being pro-human being, regardless of your religion, race, gender, anything. Okay, any of those categories.
Before you ask your controversial question, I don't want to give anyone the wrong impression. My family members who were murdered by the Nazis, the ones I know about were in Poland, but they were my mother's cousins. But I am not directly descended from Holocaust survivors. My family came to New York in the big wave of Jewish immigration at the turn of the 20th century. Many Jews left various countries in Eastern Europe and arrived on the Lower East Side of New York, you know, say between 1895 and 1910, and that was my family. So my family were already here before Hitler came to power. It's just that, and most of my family, just like most Jews, actually lost touch with family in Europe because, you know, it's not like today with the internet. I mean, you know, they didn't even make, you know, international phone calls in those days. So it's just my paternal grandfather's, no, my maternal grandfather's family kept in touch with family in Poland, and that's how we know what happened to them.
So still family, but not what we would call immediate family.
Exactly.
Oh,
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Yes. Well, it still matters. It still matters. They're human beings.
It matters a whole lot, but I just don't want to give anyone the impression that I'm descended from Holocaust survivors. I'm not.
No, and I appreciate your candidness and bringing clarity to that. Now, I've been waiting to get controversial. Okay. Now,
you're not going to get controversial. No, go ahead.
I bet I've said this hundreds of times. Okay.
And you want to say it again? I mean, you're going to be trying my patience.
I do, but especially over the past 8 or 9 months. But you know, again, if we're going to empathize with everybody, and I do empathize with Holocaust survivors, I empathize with Hamas, and I've said this hundreds of times, that Hamas is simply what most every gun-toting American would be if anyone did to the United States what the Israelis have done to the Palestinians for 76 plus years.
Yeah, I basically agree with that, but with a caveat, and that is that there are a couple of important differences between Hamas and Fatah, PLO. So Hamas are basically Muslim religious extremists, and as such, you know, I'm not enamored with that. And it's important to point out though that Netanyahu was very, very happy with Hamas. Okay. And the
even
reason,
funded them, to my understanding.
Well, actually, Israel started Hamas.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason that Netanyahu prefers Hamas is that Netanyahu does not want a two-state solution, and he has that in common with Hamas. Hamas does not want a two-state solution. Okay.
And I don't know that I would want a two-state solution if I were Palestinian. I think I'd want a free Palestine with liberty and equal justice for all.
Absolutely, and that's what my own personal preference is. Although I defer to the Palestinians to go for what they want. It's not my business. And again,
there's diverse opinions there.
Right, but to make this differentiation, I mean the secular leadership that the Palestinians had prior to Hamas failed to accomplish anything because the Israelis weren't being straight with them at all. And so the Palestinian people lost faith in them and went to religious extremists. But it's important to point out that the predecessors to Hamas, the secular leadership of the Palestinians, they were working towards a two-state solution. Okay, that was, our government, the American government, has always talked about a two-state solution. Israel has pretended to be going along with a two-state solution so that they can continue to get American support, but it's completely disingenuous because Israel has never intended to have a two-state solution. And that's why Hamas's predecessors were not successful, because there's all this bargaining about eventually coming to a two-state solution while Israel is increasing settlement activity in the occupied territories, intentionally making a two-state solution impossible. Okay.
Now, I do.
So, Hamas is like, well, no, we don't want a two-state solution. We want a free Palestine. And I agree with that. Okay. Yeah. And Netanyahu is like, well, we don't want a two-state solution. We want to take over everything. Okay. So, obviously, the Netanyahu and Hamas do not agree on the outcome, but they both agree that a two-state solution is not happening.
Yeah.
So, do I support Hamas or not? I wouldn't have voted for them. But it's like when I see the Palestinian people and every violent act, every expulsion, every deprivation, every humiliation that they have been put through for 76 years, I'm not going to judge any decision they make, frankly. I'm going to support them.
Well, yeah, and if we're talking about, you talk about, I'll use your term, the Muslim religious extremists, but these are kids, a lot of them, orphans who saw their parents die or saw their families get killed. And if we want to talk about religious extremists, let's talk about John Hagee. I mean, I can talk about my own background. I was a religious extremist. And so many people in the United States feel like God gave us this land and it was manifest destiny and it's a Christian nation and all that is a bunch of bull. So what I'm saying is your average American John Hagee listening patriot, if anybody else did to America what the Israelis have done to the Palestinians, these people would be, like I say, Hamas with a different religion. Call it whatever you want, but they would consider themselves patriots, freedom fighters, the resistance. They would not think of themselves as terrorists. So that's my point.
No, that's absolutely true. But I mean, to look at it from another perspective, America has already done what the Zionists are doing to the Palestinians. We did it to the Native Americans.
Yeah. And we're doing it to the Palestinians with our tax dollars and
absolutely
military industrial complex.
Absolutely. I mean, Israel would not exist were it not for American support, period.
No.
So you're absolutely correct about that.
Yeah.
But and this is often a remark that I get from Zionists and their bass backwards way of arguing in their I would say morally bankrupt way of arguing. It's like, how can you criticize us when you're living on stolen land? And in a sense they're right, but I mean, I live in New Jersey, and this land was taken from the Lenni Lenape people back in the 17th century, maybe into the 18th century. So this is a past ethnic cleansing.
And we are not presently, enslaving Black people or just on a murder rampage against indigenous people to this land.
Of course.
No, and yet they are. So there's got to be, there's got to be an end to it. It's wrong. Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely. But let's be clear that there's still plenty of racism in the United States.
Absolutely.
And we have not been fair to the Native Americans or to the African Americans. I mean, because this country was built by ethnically cleansing the Native Americans and with free African labor that we stole. Okay. So,
or Arabs, refugees that we created, or refugees that the CIA created from Latin America. We could go on and on. Yes.
Okay. Absolutely. But my answer to the Zionists who say, well, you're living on stolen land is like, well, if you're going to justify a modern ethnic cleansing based on a centuries-old ethnic cleansing, then we might as well have slavery again, too, by that logic, okay? You could justify contemporary slavery based on ancient slavery, if you want to base a contemporary ethnic cleansing based on a past ethnic cleansing. I mean, it's just... it's disingenuous logic. I mean, and that's how they argue.
And again, they look for the clock to keep ticking to where generations come, and then after a while, what they're doing just becomes normal. This is something we can deal with in our generation to right the injustices. We can do, reparations and a lot of things that we can do to people that that we've hurt in America and around the world, definitely. But this is something we are not. We are not carpet bombing. Native Americans right now. That's not happening. Or African Americans. That's not happening. But what they're doing is going on right now. They're crimes against humanity, and and they need to fess up to it and be held accountable for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Man, it's been so good talking with you, Rich.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure as well.
Yeah. The funny thing is sometimes I sounded more like the Jew than you did. That's kind of hilarious, but that's good. That's empathizing. That's love. That's, understanding people from the other side. So I appreciate that.
We'll make you an honorary Jew.
Well, I appreciate that. I do have tons of Jewish friends, think the world of them. So that's it's never
really.
I
don't have tons of Jewish friends anymore. Most of them have kicked me out of their lives. Well, although I do have some really good anti-Zionist Jewish friends. I mean, but they're mostly newer friends, along with my collection of lovely anti-Zionist people of all backgrounds, especially Palestinians themselves.
Yes.
So,
yes.
100%. But I lost a lot of family and friends when I embraced the Palestinian cause.
Well, that can happen too when you come out of a tradition that, somebody like an outsider like me, it's a different story altogether. Yeah. Well, I do appreciate your stand, my dear friend, and I'm so glad that both of our eyes were open. And I'm 58 years old. I know you're a little older than me at least, but
don't broadcast that.
But we're able.
Listen, I don't want anybody to know that I'm older than you. Jeez, come on.
But we're making a difference regardless of how, regardless of age, and again, passing the baton to the next generation. Is there anything in closing that you'd like to say to the audience as a word of encouragement, admonition? You got the floor.
Yeah, there is. Confront your Jewish friends. Seriously. Because they've had a free pass for too long. You know, they've been dropping the Holocaust card for too long. They've been accusing people of anti-Semitism when it's not true for too long. Let them know that you're aware that the Jewish state is committing a genocide and you don't approve of it. Mm-hmm. Don't sidestep this issue. Don't enable them to remain in their disinformation bubble. Mm. Be part of their cognitive dissonance, because my own change on this issue started with cognitive dissonance. That's the beginning, and you can help that along. Mm-hmm. Don't enable them.
Wow. I think those are good closing words of wisdom and a challenge, and we can do that. We can do that in love, and and do it in the right spirit, and in the right spirit, because we care for people, and that's everybody. That really is. That's how it needs to be.
That's everybody. Amen.
Yes, sir. All right, Rich, I cannot thank you enough. I appreciate you, my dear friend, and we'll talk again soon. How's that sound?
Okay, well, the feeling is mutual, and we absolutely will talk again soon. And I hope your audience benefited from eavesdropping on our conversation.
I believe they will. I think it's been wonderful. Good. Thanks again.
Good. Okay, thank you. Bye now.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for tuning into that wonderful interview with Rich Siegel. And remember, world peace is not only possible, it's inevitable.